Donald Trump has officially, in writing, surrendered to Michael Avenatti. One of the president's many lawyers put that surrender in writing on Saturday in a filing in federal court in California in the case of Stephanie Clifford, also known as Stormy Daniels, versus Donald J. Trump, also known as David Dennison. The president's high-priced lawyer in that case, Charles Harder, is finally doing what I've always said he should have done at the very beginning of the Stormy Daniels case, and that is simply free Stormy Daniels from the non-disclosure agreement that she signed. Legal hell has rained down on Donald Trump and Michael Cohen because they immediately tried every trick they could think of to try to stop Stormy Daniels from going public, including Michael Cohen publicly threatening to bankrupt Stormy Daniels with millions and millions of dollars in penalties that Donald Trump and Michael Cohen would visit upon her for violating her confidentiality agreement. Michael Cohen is a convicted felon tonight, and Donald Trump is an unindicted co-conspirator tonight, because of the way they chose to fight Stormy Daniels, a fight they were so confident they were going to win until they heard from Stormy Daniels' lawyer, Michael Avenatti, in court and on this program and elsewhere. And they should have realized as soon as they saw Michael Avenatti that they should drop this case. And now they are finally trying to drop the case. Both Donald Trump and Michael Cohen formally going into court saying, we released Stormy Daniels from the non-disclosure agreement. Therefore, the case is closed. But Michael Avenatti says, not so fast. And Michael Avenatti is joining us here now. And Michael, I have to tell you, when I saw they were dropping the case, I thought, okay, they are slow learners, but that's the way out of a civil case. Either side can get out of a civil case simply by doing what the other side wants. And your case was, we want Stormy Daniels to be able to speak. So they said, okay, forget it. She can speak. The case is over. And I thought that was it. That was the end of it until I started reading your pleading today. And it turns out there's more to this case.
Well, there's a lot more to this case, Lawrence. And, you know, let's back up. I've been saying for a while that we've been playing chess and they've been playing tic-tac-toe. And that's been true now for the better part of 6 months, and it's true in the last week, in the last 72 hours as well. If you'll recall, we filed a very basic complaint to start this case in March. There was a reason for that. We then made an offer of settlement shortly thereafter, and we offered to return the $130,000, and there were some other parameters, and we gave Donald Trump and Michael Cohen a set period of time to respond to that offer. They blew us off. They refused to accept the settlement offer, which I anticipated that they would do. And shortly thereafter, we filed what's called an amended complaint, where we amended our allegations and we made those allegations much more detailed. And we asked for much more than we had in the initial complaint. And there was a reason for that. And the reason why we did that, Lawrence, is because I anticipated that someday I would be sitting in a seat like this and we would be where we are right now. And the problem is that Michael Cohen and Donald Trump are in too deep. They waited too long. They didn't do what you thought they should have done 6 months ago. They didn't do what I thought they should have done, frankly, 6 months ago. And so now what they want to do is they want to cancel the case. They want to call no glory. They want to completely surrender. And we're not willing to accept that surrender under the terms that they want to offer us.
What are some of the claims in your case that would not be satisfied if they were allowed to drop out of this case now?
Well, for instance, we still have the defamation cause of action or claim against Michael Cohen. We still have the defamation claim against Donald Trump. We have another claim against Michael Cohen relating to his conduct in conspiring with Keith Davidson to hide information and documents from my client. And furthermore, as it relates to the NDA, we want a judicial finding, a determination that that NDA is not just null and void, but that it was an illegal contract that was proposed by Donald Trump in an effort to violate campaign finance law. Now, obviously, he's not going to agree to that. You, I discovered today, only today, specified this in your complaint, that you want this as a finding, or which they could then do as an admission. They could just write it out as an admission in their next filing and say, okay, yes, it was. And so you've ended up asking for more, much more than just she be released from the non-disclosure agreement. There's also an issue of attorney's fees. They poured lawyers into this thing, which ran up the costs on the Stormy Daniels side of the case, on your side of the case. And now they're saying, after having done that, well, let's just everyone go home. Well, correct. I mean, we put this finding of illegality that we sought in there for a reason, because we boxed in Donald Trump. because we knew that never in a million years would he be in a position where he could admit that, because were he to admit that, he would have a much bigger problem than
this. But you do
case.
now have that admission on record from the other party in this case, Michael Cohen. He's on record in federal court as saying exactly, in effect, what you demanded here.
Correct. So we're halfway to home.
Yeah.
Now we need the other half, which is we're going to get an admission or a judicial finding by way of competent evidence that Donald Trump conspired with Michael Cohen to do this, to violate campaign finance law. And we're either going to get that by way of an admission, which I don't think we're going to get, or by cross-examination and a deposition, and ultimately a trial. And that is our goal, and it's been my goal for 6 months, and it's going to continue to be my goal.
It's possible here that you might get all of that from Michael Cohen in writing, because there's no damage to him at this point. And then that might leave you only with Donald Trump as a defendant. Cohen might be able to work his way out of this. It is fascinating. When will the judge make a decision on whether this case continues?
On the 24th of September, we have a hearing, and we're going to get some guidance from the judge. And, you know, a number of things can happen between now and then. This is a very dynamic situation, and things happen at a very quick pace. But I just hope they keep playing tic-tac-toe, and I'm confident they will.
So here's the thing. I'm going to be right here on the 24th of September at 10 p.m. So come on, and we'll talk about how it turns out.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.